You get an invitation to go out. A party, a dinner, a casual hangout with friends. And the moment you see it, something inside you sinks. Not because you don't like these people. Not because you're antisocial. But because the thought of leaving your home, of putting on the right clothes, of being on for hours, feels exhausting before it even begins. So you start crafting your excuse. You're tired. You're not feeling well. You have work to do. And none of it is a complete lie, but none of it is the whole truth either. The whole truth is that you'd rather be home. In your space. In your comfort. Where you don't have to perform or explain or justify your existence to anyone. Or maybe it's a Friday night, and everyone's talking about their plans. Bars, clubs, concerts, events. And you're genuinely excited about your plans too. A book you've been meaning to read. A show you've been saving. Your couch. Your blanket. That specific corner of your room where everything feels right. But when people ask what you're doing, you feel this strange need to defend yourself, to make your quiet evenings sound more legitimate, more acceptable, because somewhere along the way you learned that staying home means you're missing out on life. If this is you, I need you to know something. You're not boring. You're not wasting your life. And you're definitely not broken. What you're experiencing is deeper than just preference. And once you understand where this comes from, the guilt you've been carrying might finally start to lift. Let me explain what's really happening when home feels like the only place you truly want to be. The first thing you need to understand is that for you, home isn't just a location. It's a state of being. It's the only place where you don't have to translate yourself for other people. Outside, in the world, you're constantly adjusting, monitoring your tone, reading the room, making sure you're not too much or too little, calculating how long to make eye contact, when to laugh, what to say, how to sit. You're running 1,000 tiny programs in the background just to exist in social spaces. And it's exhausting in a way that's hard to explain to people who don't experience it. But at home, all those programs shut off. You can just be. No performance. No adjustment. No translation. Home is the only place where your existence doesn't require effort. Here's what makes this even more complex. You're not actually avoiding people. You're avoiding the version of yourself you have to become around people. Because you've learned, probably over years, that the real you, the unfiltered you, is somehow too much or not enough for the world outside. Maybe you're too quiet, and people read that as unfriendly. Maybe you're too intense, and people find it overwhelming. Maybe you process things slowly, and social situations move too fast for you to keep up. So you've created this social version of yourself, and maintaining that version takes energy you just don't always have. At home, you don't need that version. You can be weird, you can be silent, you can be exactly as much or as little as you are in any given moment, and no one's there to judge it. And there's something else happening that most people don't talk about. The world is loud, not just in volume, but in demand. Every time you leave your house, the world is asking something of you. Be productive. Be interesting. Be engaged. Be available. Consume. Participate. Respond. And for someone with your particular nervous system, that constant demand feels like standing in a room where everyone's talking at once and you can't find the door. Home is where you finally get to step out of that room, where the noise stops, where the demands pause, where you can hear yourself think again. If you're nodding your head right now, if you're feeling seen in a way you haven't felt in a while, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you want more content that helps you understand why you are the way you are, that makes you feel less like something's wrong with you, hit subscribe. Because you deserve to keep hearing that your way of being is valid. People who love staying home are often carrying something others don't see. You're carrying a sensitivity to stimulation that the world doesn't acknowledge or accommodate. Bright lights drain you. Crowds drain you. Small talk drains you. Not because you're weak, but because you process everything more deeply. You notice things other people filter out. The hum of fluorescent lights. The texture of social tension. The subtle shift in someone's energy. You're taking in more information in every moment than most people realize exists. And by the time you get home, you're not just tired. You're overstimulated to the point of exhaustion. And society doesn't make space for that. Society says if you're not out there engaging, networking, socializing, experiencing, then you're not really living. It tells you that life happens outside in the world with other people, and that home is just where you rest between the real moments. But for you, home is where the real moments happen. It's where you finally feel like yourself. It's where you create, think, process, and exist without the weight of constant performance. Here's where it gets really interesting. The people who love staying home the most are often the ones who've been misunderstood the most. Maybe growing up, people called you shy when you weren't shy, you just needed time to feel safe. Maybe they called you antisocial when you weren't antisocial, you were just selective about who got your energy. Maybe they made you feel like something was wrong with you for not wanting what everyone else seemed to want, for not finding joy in the things that were supposed to bring joy. So you learned to feel guilty about your own preferences. You learned that wanting to be alone meant something was broken in you. And that guilt followed you into adulthood. where now every time you choose home over going out, you feel like you're failing at life. Let me tell you what happens when this pattern continues for years. It stops being just a preference and becomes your identity. You start calling yourself a homebody, an introvert, a hermit, like it's a fixed part of who you are. And maybe it is. But somewhere underneath that identity is also a protection. Because if you label yourself as someone who just doesn't like going out, then you never have to examine why going out feels so hard. You never have to look at the anxiety that spikes when you think about social situations. You never have to acknowledge that maybe you're not just choosing home. Maybe you're avoiding a world that's never quite felt safe. And that's not a judgment. That's just the truth. For a lot of people who love staying home, it's not purely preference. It's also refuge. Home is where you can control the variables, where you know what to expect, where you don't have to brace yourself for rejection, judgment, or misunderstanding. Out there, in the world, anything can happen. People can be unpredictable. Situations can shift in ways you can't anticipate. But home is stable, familiar, yours. Before we continue, I want you to pause and look at the comments below this video. You'll see thousands of people saying, "This is exactly me, and I've never felt so understood." You're not alone in this. And if you're ready, leave a comment sharing your experience. Even if it's just "I feel this." Because when you name what you're going through, you're helping someone else realize they're not weird or broken either. Think of your relationship with home like a battery that only charges in one specific outlet. Other people can charge anywhere, in any social situation, with any group of people. But you need a specific environment, a specific level of quiet, a specific kind of safety. And when you don't get that, you don't just get tired. You start to malfunction. Your thoughts get scattered. Your emotions get raw. Your tolerance for minor inconveniences disappears. Home is where you plug back in, where you come back to yourself. And there's nothing wrong with needing that. But here's what your love of staying home is also telling you. It's not just about what home gives you. It's about what the world takes from you. Every time you leave your house, you're performing emotional labor that most people don't even realize they're doing. You're managing other people's perceptions of you. You're navigating unspoken social rules. You're giving pieces of yourself to conversations, interactions, and obligations that may not give anything back. And when you finally get home, you're not just resting. You're recovering. You're reclaiming the parts of yourself you had to mute or modify just to exist in spaces that weren't built for people like you. And there's a grief in that. A quiet, unspoken grief that you're not allowed to talk about because people will just tell you to put yourself out there more. Or you're missing out on life. But you're not missing out. You're just living life on terms that make sense for your particular nervous system, your particular way of processing the world, your particular need for depth over breadth. People who love staying home aren't avoiding life. They're protecting their capacity to actually live it. Because when you're someone who feels everything deeply, who processes everything intensely, who needs time and space to metabolize your own thoughts and emotions, then being out in the world all the time isn't living. It's survival. It's constant stimulation without integration. It's taking in more than you can process, and never giving yourself the space to make sense of it. Home is where you integrate, where you process, where you finally get to think about what you actually think, feel what you actually feel, want what you actually want, without the noise of everyone else's expectations drowning out your own internal voice. And that's not antisocial. That's self-preservation. Here's what a lot of people don't understand. You can love people and still love being alone. You can value connection and still need significant amounts of solitude. You can have meaningful relationships and still prefer your own company most of the time. These things aren't contradictions. They're just the reality of being someone who recharges in quiet, who thinks in stillness, who feels most like themselves when they're not performing for an audience. And maybe the reason you feel guilty about staying home is because you've internalized a very specific cultural message that says your worth is measured by your social activity. That interesting people are always doing something. That fulfilled people have packed calendars. That happiness looks like constant engagement with the world outside. But that's not a universal truth. That's just one way of being, and it's not your way. Your way is slower, quieter, deeper. You'd rather have one meaningful conversation than 10 surface-level interactions. You'd rather spend an evening fully immersed in something you love than scatter your attention across a dozen activities that don't feed you. You'd rather be alone and present than surrounded by people and numb. And there's a richness to that way of living that gets completely overlooked in a culture obsessed with extroversion. Think about what you do when you're home. You read. You think. You create. You rest. You feel. You process. You dream. You connect with yourself in ways that are impossible when you're constantly in motion. You're not wasting time. You're spending it on the relationship that will be with you for your entire life. The one with yourself. And here's the truth that sits beneath all of this. You're not afraid of the world. You're exhausted by the version of yourself you have to be in it. You're not antisocial. You're selectively social, and you've learned that most social situations require more than they give. You're not missing out. You're opting out of a game that was never designed for people who think, feel, and process the way you do. The people who love you, who really love you, they don't need you to show up at every event. They don't need you to be available all the time. They don't need you to prove your love through constant presence. They understand that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is take care of your own energy so that when you do show up, you can actually be there. Fully, completely, without resentment or depletion. So if you're someone who finds more peace in your living room than in any social gathering, who feels more alive in solitude than in crowds, who has built a life inside your home that feels more real than anything outside of it, I want you to know this. You're not broken. You're not boring. You're not wasting your life. You're just someone who needs space and quiet and safety to be fully yourself. And there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe the guilt will start to fade when you stop measuring your life against someone else's definition of living and start trusting that the life you've built, quiet and small and home-centered as it is exactly the life that fits who you are. You don't need to change this. You just need to understand it. And maybe, with time, you'll stop apologizing for the way you recharge, for the pace at which you live, for the fact that your favorite place on earth is the one place where you can finally stop trying and just be. You are not less than because you love staying home. You're just different. And different isn't wrong. It's just yours. Now, if this video made you feel less alone, less guilty, less like you're doing life wrong, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button right now. Because you deserve to keep getting content that validates your experience instead of making you feel broken. Tap that like button if this resonated with you on a level you weren't expecting. Drop a comment below sharing your story, even if it's just, I relate to this so much. Your words might be exactly what another homebody needs to read today to feel less weird about who they are. And if you know someone who loves staying home, who constantly feels pressured to go out more, who needs to hear that they're not wasting their life, share this video with them. Send it to that friend who always declines invitations and feels guilty about it. Share it in your stories. Because the more we normalize different ways of living, the less shame people will carry for simply being themselves. You being here, watching this, trying to understand yourself better, that matters. And I'm going to keep making videos that help you do exactly that. You're not broken. You're just home. And that's exactly where you're meant to be.